We'll make a start. So welcome all to the Overall Scrutiny meeting of the 7th of June 2022. Just like to advise, this meeting is a public meeting and it's being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. And could I ask you all to turn your phones off or mute them just so that we can conduct the meeting. So the first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. None. Okay, next is for apologies for absence.
So we received apologies from absence from Councillor Davis, Councillor Potter and Councillor Shaw and Councillor Borman, with Councillor Clancy as appointed substitute. Good.
Thank you. Next item is the minutes of the Overall Scrutiny meeting on the 3rd of May 2022. Can I take those as read? Any amendments? Nope. Okay, any matters arising from those? I will just advise that the meeting of the Cabinet on the 12th of May, the decision varied from those of the committee, with Cabinet voting in favour of the accommodation review. Item 5, Chairman's announcement. I have nothing to say at this point. Next we'll go to public speaking. Is there any public speaking?
There's no public speaking.
So we'll move on to the first of the Cabinet reports. So we'll move to agenda item 11 on page 35. Ask Rodney. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a start and then I'll hand over to Rodney. So the purpose of the report you have in front of you today is to provide an update in terms of performance and finance position at Q4, and also to provide a year-end position for the Council for 21-22. I'll cover a really high-level overview of the performance section of the report, and then I'll hand over to Rodney, who will cover the finance section. So just as a brief summary to the report, in Appendix 3, you have an overview of the delivery measures, and this provides an overview of the performance of the Council using the metrics that we designed in the 21-22 delivery plan. And then in Appendix 2, you have a year-end summary of the delivery plan for 21-22. So just in terms of performance at year end, we have 15 measures which have either met or exceeded the initial success criteria that we designed in our delivery plan. And there's been some really good examples of some great work which has taken place throughout 21-22, as you'll see by some of the examples provided within the report. And just to give one example of a green measure, over 21-22, we've supported over 3,500 vulnerable residents through a range of our discretionary prevention services, such as our early help hub, our social prescribing service, and our debt and welfare services. 9 measures at year-end are amber, so this means they haven't met our year-end target by a narrow margin. Just to give you an example of one of these measures is our collection rate of council tax. So at year-end, you'll see in the report the team collected 98.83% of council tax, which is an increase on the collection rate of last year and is only slightly behind our target at 98.9%, and that's why that was given an amber RAG rating. And just finally, 2 measures at year end are red, and both of these are within the planning service, and this is the percentage of decisions made within statutory timescales, and this is both for householders and minors others. Both of these metrics at year end, and that's an average from Q1 to Q4, are below the targets that we've set in the 21-22 delivery plan. However, as you'll see in the report in the appendix, in Q4, both of those metrics have shown an improvement from Q3 to Q4, with minors others in Q3 sitting at 79%, and then in Q4 growing in performance to 89%, and then for householders in Q3 sitting at 76%, and again growing in Q4 to 91%. I will pause there on the performance. If there's any questions, we do have a range of directors and ADs in the room to answer any service-specific questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the performance report? Sue?
Just one. I'm not sure whether this comes under finance or what you've just said, Sinead, but I was curious about why there were fewer audit days under the Chief of Staff Directorate.
That's me. So that's, let me just get that. That's still, I am working that through with Rodney. So that's with audit days. It's to do with timing of the budget. So we set the budget and we set the audit plan after we've set the budget. So there's always that bit of variance that we work through. That's all that is. So it's not that we've delivered any less. It's just the audit plan is set, as you know, goes through audit committee, is set slightly after the budget. So we try and do a best guess when we set the audit plan.
Anybody else have any questions for Sinead?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Vice Chair. Steve?
Yeah, on the on the reds, could you just go through why this occurred, why we did have the slippage and we went into red, and then also I know we're yet to discuss the report, but I did read it last night as we're supposed to, in terms of the planning proposals for an enhanced majors team, if you like. But I did notice in there that it's going to reduce one planning officer. So what is the long-term plan here for keeping this and getting it into green, keeping it into green, and keeping this measurable in place and on target?
Chair, are we able to bring Helen Mellors in, AD for planning?
We
please?
can indeed.
So as far as the business case, that's a separate item on your agenda paper, and actually there's an additional in resource which I can explain when we come to that, so we're not losing any posts. Actually there's a net gain of 6 posts, so we are looking to have additional resources to focus on delivery of our performance. As previously updated in previous updates to you on the quarter 2 and 3 performance, it was due to, we did have a backlog and lack of resources in registering applications, so they took longer to register, which then obviously impacted on our determination time. But as you can see in that quarter 2, if you go back actually in the papers, the specific reason that we put all the quarter 1s in this update was we have seen a progression since quarter 2 where it was down to 65 and 63%, with the reasons we identified at the time back to 89 and 91. So we are confident with the additional resources that we do need to deliver all the applications, we should actually get back to meeting our measures in the coming year.
Going back to this quarter, applications that didn't meet the timing target here, are you confident that all of those have now been cleared?
There will be still some in the system, because we have to agree what's to be in time outside of the statutory time. We have to agree what's called an extension of time, which counts it being in time, with the applicant on agent. And sometimes they don't agree to that, although we're still awaiting amendments. So it's not in our gift to ensure we always get the target, because we do have to negotiate and agree that with the applicant, and some applicants will not agree to that. So that's why our targets are set as they are. To highlight, obviously we're in quarter 1 at the moment, we still haven't got all our resources, so until we get all our resources we won't actually see that improvement, but we are actually managing the workload with the resources we have. And given that we didn't used to have targets for Broadland and we set them very high, I think obviously it shows that we are actually addressing it and monitoring it and going in the right direction, Chair.
And you have the report coming through for the additional resource to alleviate part of that problem as well? Yes.
Just one final question on that, Chair. So, and just in relation to any that are outstanding, we're talking about minors here. So a resident, you know, wants an extension, I want to do something like that, minor one. You're saying that the ones that are outstanding because you've not reached an agreement with them in terms of the time.
Some of those will be that. I haven't got that exact figures in front of me, but some of them we don't agree 100. We will be very fortunate to agree 100% in time, because some of them might need amendments and the applicant doesn't agree an extension out of those times for us to then reconsult on it. So we do have to negotiate with that with the applicant.
Okay, so I will be bringing to your attention outside the meeting of 2 cases where that isn't the case. So I'll bring it
Absolutely,
to your
as
attention.
always, as you become aware of the members, if there's ones you're concerned on delays, please contact us direct.
Okay.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Strategic Risk Dashboard, page 47, 321, work still ongoing with the risk register and not the report. Can you tell us when we are anticipating this to be completed, and will that be issued to the members, you know?
Chair, I can pick
Yeah.
that up. So worry not, we are managing risk and we are we are on top of it, Ken. So don't
Yeah.
worry. We're just working through with Cabinet some of those final risks on the strategic risk register, and obviously they are the owners of that risk register. So as soon as we've got that finalised, we'll bring that through in the next quarterly report for you.
Thank you. I then have Caroline.
Thank you. If I could go back to Helen, how are the issues with nutrient neutrality affecting the timescales, please?
So that will potentially affect the timescales if we don't agree an extension of time with the applicants. We can't actually issue those decisions because it wouldn't be lawful to do so. So there may be an impact moving forward on those that applicants don't agree an extension of time, or we could decide to refuse and default. But obviously we would want to work with somebody to try and resolve the nutrients neutrality issue. So what we did as an authority, we asked for an extension of time on all our majors for at least 6 months while we try to resolve that, and for our minors and others 2 months. But given we haven't come to a conclusion on those within the first 2 months, we are going back for another 2 months. There will be some of those that the applicants won't agree to, but we will be able to monitor on that and actually perhaps give you figures that actually say of these are held up because of nutrients neutrality. But yes, there could be even more impacted going forward. But I would like to present those differently because obviously they're on hold for a specific reason.
Thank you. I then had Sue Catchpole.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking at page 51 and note that there was lower than anticipated recovery of housing benefit overpayments. Just that phrase concerns me, especially with the difficulties that people are beginning to have with paying their bills. Can I ask, how do housing benefit overpayments arise, and what can we possibly do to try to make sure it doesn't happen so that people aren't getting into debt?
Rodney? Oh, sorry, Helen.
Between me and Rodney, we'll try and cover. Rodney, you go first. Obviously, the AD's not here, but Rodney.
Thank you.
So obviously we pay out housing benefit, and for instance, if they forget to notify us for the change of circumstances, then we'll backdate it for when they actually moved out of property or moved in a property. So actually we could be paying them housing benefit longer than they're entitled for. Therefore, there'll be an overpayment. If that happens, we then seek to recover that overpayment, and that may be through ongoing housing benefit deductions, or if they've moved on to universal credit in the meantime, we then have to try and recover it that way. And it's more difficult to recover money through universal credit than it was when we were paying housing benefit. So we are noticing it's getting more difficult to recover housing benefit overpayments. However, we are seeing more people move over to universal credit as well, which means that the total quantum of housing benefit, and therefore the total quantum of housing benefit overpayments, is also reducing because we're no longer responsible for some of the payments.
Sorry, Chair, I have another question. It's okay. Oops. On page 55, under staff satisfaction, there's a line that says only 18% of staff respondents believe that senior management doesn't encourage them to look after their mental health. I think 18% is nearly a fifth, and that's surely not acceptable. And I just wondered what we were going to do to try to make sure that 100% of our staff feel that their management's looking after their mental health. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Really good question, Councillor Catchpole. I completely agree. I wouldn't want to see that 18% there by any stretch. What we have done is we've introduced, I think I've talked to you before about mental health first aiders. We now have over 70 of those trained across the organisation. So that gives people that are struggling with their mental health someone to go to on a confidential basis. And we're a signposting. So whilst you can't, as a mental health first aider, you're not there to solve the problem, you're there to signpost. So we've rolled those out across the organisation. And with managers as well, we're doing some more training with those. So whilst they won't necessarily all of them be first aid trained. They will be trained with how to deal with mental health issues, all therefore targeted to make sure that you don't see that 18% figure, because I absolutely agree. I want every one of our staff to feel that they are supported 100%. So we are tackling that.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. Just following up on the point made by Councillor Riley with regards to extensions. Planning decisions made within a statutory timescale. If the consultee, for example, the parish council, requests an extension, does that change the deadline, or does it have any impact on the statutory deadline, or is it still that they have to get the decision made within the applicant's timescale or deadline or whatever? Thanks.
As Councillor Nurden's probably aware, in some cases we will allow an extension on statutory consultees to come back to us. We try and manage that within the statutory timescales because we do want to determine those in time. To give extra time on consultations if there hasn't been an amendment does affect the potential for us to determine in time. So we manage those in a way that we can still agree those within the agreed time. So we don't automatically say yes to extension of times for consultation responses because we have a statutory duty to determine them in time.
Okay, I'd like to see you after the meeting as well. Thanks.
Thank you. If there's nothing on the RAG report, then we'll go Rodney.
On the, it's just following through Sue's question about the staff wellbeing. I mean, the line actually is only 18% of respondents having seen, believe senior management doesn't encourage them to look after their mental health. The question I've got around this is done from a wellbeing survey. I'm addressing it to Emma because I think that's your role, Emma. From a wellbeing survey, is that survey anonymous? The reason why I'm asking is because notwithstanding what Emma said about, you know, the first aid, mental health first aiders, this is about management. I'm seeing this in the questionnaire as it's written, in the report here. So is this anonymous? And if not, then how can we actually follow through with staff in terms of their feeling here about management?
Yep. So the way that we deal with this, and we have got a new staff survey starting, which is a monthly staff survey. And whilst surveys show that an anonymous response encourages more honesty, which is really good, but at the same time, we do break that down by directorate or down by assistant directorate. So if we've got a specific area, so say if I was to look at those results and those 18% were all in my area, then that's me that we need to be having a conversation with to understand why do people in that area feel that they're not supported. So yes, there is that level of anonymity, but broken down to an appropriate level to protect that anonymity, but give us direction of where we need to target our attention to deal with issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Could you?
Thank you, Chair. So before you are the provisional outturn figures for the last financial year 21-22. They're provisional because they don't get finalised until we complete our actual statutory accounts, which will be in the next couple of months before they're presented to the Audit Committee. Key points is very much the financial performance has been strong this financial year. We've received additional income and we've identified numerous sort of savings and efficiencies. So the revenue outturn position at the end of the financial year was £11.4 million, which is very much in line with what we expected the next cost of services to be at the Q3 position. So very much the outturn position is in line with what we were expecting during the year. With regard to capital, we spent £13.4 million and there's requests for £3.7 million worth of capital carry forwards to carry out these capital works in future years. And that was all I was going to say on the report, but just to highlight that the recommendations on page 35 are the correct version. The ones on page 48 have got an error in them, so actually I'd like to refer to the recommendations on page 35.
Thank you, Rodney. I was going to say that. Does anybody have any questions on the financials?
Yeah. So on page excuse me, on page 39, Rodney, we've got 3.9, 3.10, 3.11, and it goes on in terms of where there's been, as it's termed here, favourable variance against budget. I see that resource Directorate 662,000, and primarily it's got a number of bullet points there. One is salary underspend carried forward from last year, and then it's got corporate contingency, etc., etc. How much of the 662 is on the first bullet point? Salary underspend.
I'll point you to page 49, which very much the appendix 1, which gives a more detailed breakdown of those variances. So the commentary in that main report was very much the high level things. So you'll see that the salary underspend of £142,000 carry forward was last year, was the amount that hasn't been spent. So out of that £662,000 for revenues underspend, 142 of it was because of the actual carry forward from last year of those salary figures.
Thank you. And just one other bullet point, one on the plan in place, which is 412. Just on the page again. I think it was 412.
Yes.
Again, what was that on the salary side?
Page 50.
I don't have that on the salary side, but actually the key point in place of that 412, it's extra SIL income, which was £267,000. So actually that extra SIL income was a very big component of the overall favourable variance within place.
Okay. Would it be possible after the meeting, Rodney, to supply what the figure was for salary under the underspend there? Thank you.
Anybody else for Rodney on the financials? Sue Holland?
So just for clarification, are we at a point where we can ask questions on Appendix 3, which is the delivery plan? Or is that coming up?
Delivery plans afterwards.
It's all part of the.
That's all part
It's all
of the-
part of the same report, so you can ask questions.
That's what I was wondering. Okay. Sorry, I've got to find my page again now. Oh, okay. Firstly, I was just disappointed again, and I will keep raising this, to see that under the vision for our place, our priorities, our people, our approach, that growing our economy is listed first. I was told last time I raised this that these areas for our focus are in no particular order, but unfortunately, because growing our economy appears first, I think that suggests that our priority is just that, and I would like to see serving our residents as more of our priority. That's just a comment. A question, which I shall find in a moment. The Bure Valley Path and Railway under F9 on page 117. The works are currently underway to improve that path, but there's great concern locally in Aylsham as to what will happen regarding a crossing for the A140. Seems to have been overlooked in that piece of road is extremely busy and cars are moving particularly quickly. And I wondered if somebody could help me to identify what is going to happen to enable people to cross the A140 to use that improved pathway. Thank you.
I think that would probably sit with Phil Courtier or Helen, would it?
I'm unfortunately haven't got an update on that, so we can get back to you on that, of course, though, Sue.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Anybody else have any questions on the financials or the delivery plan? So I will refer you to page 35 and the 5 recommendations on page 35, and 3 of them are to receive. But can I ask that we take them all on block? If everybody happy to take them all on block?
Could I just ask, I've got one question on finance, actually.
Apologies.
Yeah, on finance and the year, we're talking about 1.278 in terms of the savings, Rodney. Transitional costs. It was raised before, I believe, Sinead, our previous ONS on this about transitional costs. And now transitional costs, I think you quantified them before in relation to redundancy payments, etc., going back to when the executive management was replaced. The transitional costs that was mentioned, that was asked for before, is there has to be transitional costs associated with officer time in terms of collaboration process, aligning policies, aligning IT, etc., etc., etc. So is there any way that you can actually quantify some of those transitional costs set against the savings?
I think the simple answer is no, because very much it is people on my time going actually reviewing the policies as part of bringing the one team together. We would have been reviewing policies anyhow, because actually it's good practice to review all your policies every so often. So things are actually, you could argue that the fact you're doing it for the 2 councils and bringing them together is probably even more efficient than trying to do one council one year and another council the other year. But we certainly haven't got a method of trying to work out how much officer time has been spent on bringing the one team together. It's just part of the normal business as usual of running the 2 councils.
Okay, just one observation on that. Actually, there has to be transitional costs in that. I mean, before the one team, we had 99% of officer time spent on policy development directed by the executive who run the council, or elected to do so, might have a policy change, but then they're on their day jobs. Under collaboration, there has to be some other transitional costs. But what you're saying, I think, Rodney, is you find it's difficult to actually pinpoint what they are. Is that correct? Would that be fair?
I think what Rodney's saying is that, of course, there's transitional, there's bound to be, Steve, but we would create a whole industry in ourselves if we were to start measuring that. All the work that we are doing, we're still both cabinet models, we're still both executive led, and we're still instructed by both sets of cabinet to do the work. And where we can, we align and do the work at the same time, bringing through efficiencies as we work through both in terms of policy, practice and procedure, but also the IT systems that are coming through. So yes, in its purest sense, there would be transitional costs, but I think you would want us spending our time would be best served on doing rather than trying to measure that, I would suggest.
Thank you. Can I take you to page 35 then, and we'll go to the... Okay. Oh, right, okay.
Under H1A on page 131, there's a suggestion that we're working together with Norfolk Constabulary to look at antisocial behaviour. I'm just wondering whether other areas are experiencing a rise in antisocial behaviour. I'm beginning to hear through the grapevine perhaps there is. And if that is the case, what can we do, or what are we going to do? Would we be able to have a more detailed report of what Broadland is doing to help residents and businesses to cope with that, or to deal with that?
Yep.
Can I suggest we put that to the AD that's not here, and perhaps he sends around a member briefing for you, Councillor Catchpole, if that's okay?
Yep.
Sorry, Chair, one more question. Under promote and expand the reach of community emergency plans, one thing that I'm aware of is that I haven't, in my 4 years here as a councillor, had training in this area, and I was wondering whether we could improve and make our contribution more useful if we had emergency planning training as councillors. Thank you.
Can I take that back
I
as
was
a
gonna
question
say,
and then we'll work that through? We
I
are
think so, yeah.
through the member development panel looking at the training plan for the 4 years for councillors, so I can build that into that with Councillor King. I'll feed that into Councillor King.
Thank you. Sue, you then had a question on the...
Yeah, it was recommendation number 3 to agree to recommend to full council the slippage request for capital as detailed in para 3.16. Could we clarify exactly what the total slippage request is from that table?
Rodney?
Paragraph 3.17, but
Yeah.
I haven't on page 42,
Yes.
which is 3.714209.
Yeah.
So
It's on the
Page
bottom of page
42.
42, the 0.3.17. So you've got the DFG 521,000, the ICT budget's 514. Yeah. Thank you. I think we've got to where we need to. So can we take the recommendations on page 35? All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Against? Abstaining?
And 1 abstention.
Thank you. Move on to agenda item 11, the licensing services. Lee, I'd like to present a brief summary. And, sorry. Ken, page 176.
Chair, if I can introduce briefly before handing over to Lee Chant. I'm sure you don't want to spend an awful lot of time on the introductions to this report. We, in regulatory services, have a ultimate purpose to protect the public and to promote community safety, but in business regulation also to promote a business level playing field. So those businesses that are spending the time and effort to comply with regulations would expect that others do so likewise. The purpose of these two reports is to present some enhancements to existing services which will require a cost recovery, and the council has a commercialisation strategy which proposes that we recover our costs. So we're looking at cost recovery, no more than that, for some enhancements to services which businesses are telling us that they would favour the introduction of. This is covered in our delivery plan. It's moved forward from last year in the delivery phase. So you have two reports and you'll find that the themes are consistent between this report and the next one. So what we say this one into this report will largely apply to the one that follows. So our businesses tell us that these enhancements are ones that they would wish to see and they're supportive of those. We will have a very strong conflict of interest policy to ensure that there is no there's no adverse effects, but we don't expect to see those either. These service enhancements are distinctly complementary to the regulation of businesses. And anytime we offer a service that's at cost to a business, it will be a part of our standard terms that should we identify any matter that requires us to step in as a regulator rather than in offering advice and support, then we will need to put a different hat on at the point that we find something adverse, for example, during a visit. Now, if so, then I will stop there and hand over to Lee Chant for a very brief introduction, which we propose to do just by way of illustrating what these services might be like.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, it's really outlining that these service enhancements are discretionary. We are a regulatory service area, both licensing for the first report, food safety for the second, and we still want to continue carrying on giving free advice at initial point of contact with the authority. So we've got Business Regulatory Support Hub that we've set up to provide that first level of information advice and assist any business inquiry, whether that be for a new license in the case of the first report, or food business operator, or other business looking for a startup in the area, providing not only regulatory advice, but some support advice linked to colleagues in Economic Growth Department and service of available grants, funding and other support that may be available at that point of contact with the authority. So I think that's a fundamental understanding that this is discretionary. We're looking at what enhancements we can do, and we're looking to be as creative as we can be to support not only businesses with the advice that they need, but the knock-on effect that that has then protecting the public safety and many other aspects of the licensing objectives that we have here. So I think with a bit of an overview, we're looking to offer some complementary products that we can give both in a visit capacity, where a business may want to have that point of contact at their actual place of proposed business or actual business, or whether that's where they would like to ring fence some time to discuss proposals that may be well in advance of them starting up, but maybe supportive of a business plan that they would like to get that initial entry advice. And it just helps them provide and spend any money wisely at the outset, so that they don't waste money and then have to unpick it at a later date. So I think that's quite critical with where we're going with this early advice, and it's almost before we get to the regulatory function that we have as a service. So I think that's quite important. There's a list of the proposed services that we're looking to do in Appendix 1. Some of it is akin to what you may be familiar with say, passport application and check and send. So we can not necessarily guarantee that somebody will get a license, but we can guarantee that they will have a complete application. And sometimes for a business, when they're looking to get a license in place, that lead time is quite critical. So time is money. Sometimes the business wants to make sure that they give themselves the best chance to have that application complete, go through the process and receive the license to be able to start trading at the earliest opportunity. So by doing and offering that service, we can support that business and encourage economic growth within our service and district. Since the reports went to SEAC, had some updated information from finance colleagues linked to full costs. The direct salary costs were already appreciated, but there's some nuances that we've reflected from overheads. And what that means is, since SEAC, the figures that are shown in Appendix 2 are reduced in all cases. So the products that we were looking at, it's, as we've mentioned already, it's a cost recovery basis. So those, for example, a check and send for one of the more complex applications that would require up to 2 hours officer time, previously was £100. It's now still 2 hours, but it's now reduced to £78. And for example, pre-application advice bookable by half-hour appointments was £25. That's now £19.50. So as ever, we keep abreast of what costs are, and we pass those on. We're not looking to make profit in the true commercialisation way, but it is a commercialised product that has a commercial value to businesses that wish to avail themselves of the discretionary services. We're not in a position to offer this level of service across the board as a routine without significant resource improvement. So what we're trying to do is cut our cloth accordingly, offer that service, and with cost recovery, subject to the amount of interest, we can then utilise that money to either buy-in services, or in the longer term, if there is after the initial 1-year pilot, we're looking to mainstream it. And further down the line, once we've got some evidence of track record, that might be that we say we need additional FTE, but we'd have an evidence base for that. Initially, we're looking to pilot it for a 1-year period, and then we would come back through committee cycle to seek to then take that as a permanent addition and inclusion of council services. So it's a toe in the water, see what interest there is, and where there's significant or appreciable value from the business community, we will then look to take that on as a regular part of our service. So on Appendix 3, there's some benchmarking there. In terms of licensing, we went on Licensing Guru, which is a forum used by licensing professionals, and not all local authorities are working in this way. I think we've been quite innovative, but there are some that have done something similar, and we've produced some relevant information. And I think if you were to look at that, you see we compare very favourably with what we're offering. So it's not a punitive cost on business, and it would always be discretionary. So I would ask if you'd be supportive of piloting those service enhancements for a 12-month period, and agree for the income that is generated to be able to be reinvested in the service, as otherwise it would have an impact on our regulatory services. open to questions.
Thank you. And I think, like, as you say, the key is that it's a cost recovery basis rather than just. So I'll take Ken.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, Lee, I think you should reiterate to the committee as itself, as we've just previously, that, you know, individuals don't necessarily have to go to here. They can go to private outside organisations, and the costs are greatly enhanced. So we're offering quite a reduced excellent service as against the outside industries.
Yes, that's covered in the other options part of the report. We could go down a sort of a recommended contractor list, but then we lose some control over that. We could let market forces dictate it, but we're looking at cost recovery, whereas if it's market forces, it's other business offering this advice. They will want to do that at profit. They're not in a philanthropic situation. So again, I think we offer not only authoritative advice because we are the licensing authority, but we can say what you would need to do as a bare minimum, and also then help that business achieve a level of compliance and get through the licensing process.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, okay. Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, what was, you know, it is clear what is on offer. I'm just a little bit concerned as we move to a tough economic environment with a number of businesses, especially SMEs, under pressure. Is this really a route we should be pursuing, to be charging people for the advice they need to obtain a statutory instrument to actually carry out their business? I am, as a local authority, as a service provider, whilst I'm all for commercialisation and I'm all for cost recovery, but I think the people who will be potentially more affected by this are startups and SMEs. If you Witherspoons, you've got a full legal department and you've able to deal with these matters. If you're a large either Hackney Carriage, private hire company, whatever, you're able to deal with these matters, and you're not actually working to a very, very tight budget. I must suggest some reservations about you know, these kind of fees being charged more specifically in an environment where the economy is going to get really, really difficult, Chairman. And I see, you know, us as an organisation, we are a service provider. We want to be encouraging these businesses. We want to be doing all we can to promote these businesses and to encourage enterprise and entrepreneurship. I'm slightly nervous about the imposition of further costs. I mean, arguably,
I think I understand your
Thank
positioning
you.
on there, and I think what we're saying within the report is that the level of service that is already there will continue to be there. This is for an enhanced service, and from my understanding, Lee, it's discretionary.
Chair, if I can assist, no one needs to take up these services. They are enhanced services over and above everything that the council already provides. Our testing would indicate that these are low charges compared to anything that currently, if businesses want this enhanced support, they'd have to go to the private sector, to someone who doesn't know the area, doesn't know their business, and where they have a lower level of trust. So the intention is that we can use the council's expertise, its local trusted position in regulatory terms to provide some enhanced support. They are modest fees. They are only cost recovery fees. We couldn't offer these services without covering the costs of doing so. But businesses are absolutely free to take them up or not. Some estimates nationally have indicated it could cost as much as £7,000 in wasted money if you start up a business and find that you made mistakes. Well, if I knew that it was going to cost me less than £170, significantly less than that, to receive advice that saved me potentially thousands of pounds, I would probably see that as a pretty good investment. And so our testing, just to reassure you, our testing from businesses would suggest that actually these costs are modest, and these are services that businesses, if they're so inclined, are keen to see and to receive support from. So I think we could probably put your mind at rest that these are low, and the feedback is from businesses. Actually, at that level, it would be a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I? So that's the typical feedback we're getting.
Okay. Next, I had Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. Are you saying that these services that are provided here, which you're going to cost now, were provided before but were free? You didn't provide them before?
No, these were additional services. What we have done in the past on an ad hoc basis is to respond to individual inquiries, but clearly we can't do that at length, and we can't do that for a number of hours. We can't take a licensing officer for a number of hours to assist an individual business when we have a very small licensing team to serve all of our license applicants.
Yeah, I do understand that. I understand you've got to recover the cost, but I'm a bit concerned the council is going down a route of where we are charging for advice. It happened in planning, and it's happened now with licensing, and we are a service provider.
Could I just come back on that?
Sorry, so the council has signed off the commercialisation strategy, hence the direction that this, I get your point, but the council has signed that off, so we are following the strategy that has been set.
And also in support of that, we've established the Business Regulatory Support Hub, and we've looked at how we provide free advice, and we're actively promoting that on social media channels, LinkedIn, just to try and get that point of contact with a local rate number, access to inbox, so that we're doing all that we can to provide access to point of free of service information advice for all startups in a better way than we did previously. So I think it's the service enhancement here are complementary to the other enhancements that we're doing for the free of access advice.
Yeah, I do understand that. I'm just worried that we're going to have other departments going down this route, charging for advice. Are you going to charge for housing advice? Are you going to charge for benefit advice and that sort of thing?
I'll just refer you back to the commercialisation strategy, which sets that out.
Yeah. And also, this is for the enhanced services, not the general service that we're all, we're regulatory. Right, I've got three more, and then I think we'll go to the recommendations. So I've got Grant, Steve, and then Sue.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at Appendix 2, we talk about the full cost recovery. It's based on 22-23 pay scales, but then it also comprises service costs, service on costs, and overhead on costs to calculate. Now, we all know that cost of living is going through the roof. Is the cost going to be looked at again after 12 months? Which, because what I'm trying to figure out is at the SIAC meeting, we had certain figures. You've now reduced those figures based on new calculations. In 10 weeks' time, you do those same calculations and they could be very different again. So I'm just trying to understand why you've reduced the figures from what was accepted at the SIAC meeting.
Yeah, if I can assist, in consultation with our Assistant Director for Finance, we've carried out a review and we've identified that we've been able to refine our basis for on-cost consideration. So that is a periodic thing that we do. It's not something we do every 10 weeks. You'll be glad to know. We are looking to set fees that will run over a pilot period of 12 months, and then we will report back on findings before going any further. And we will keep costs under review. It is the Council's commercialisation strategy to recover the full cost in this context of these services. So we will keep under review what those full costs are, and we'll do that on a periodic, perhaps an annual basis. I hope that assists.
Thank you, if I may. Now, if that process has taken place, I know we have pre-application advice for planning. Are their figures now going to come down as well? Or whenever we do this kind of commercialization, are we now going to be adjusting accordingly?
We're really here presenting these proposals rather than other proposals. I wouldn't want to try and unpick the periodic basis on which any charges are reviewed, but I think our Assistant Director can help us further.
Just to remind committee that fees and charges are looked at annually, so that's done as part of the budget setting. These have come through separately because it's things that we haven't charged for before. It's additionality. They will fall into that regular annual review as with every other charges.
Thank you. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in fact, Grant's raised a point I was going to raise, and just follow through on that actually. So from SEAC, the figures have been revised. The report, as I understand it, SEAC was a report that was going through to Cabinet. So you've mentioned the AD finance in recalculating this following SEAC. Was the portfolio holders involved in that as well to go through to Cabinet, or was it just the Assistant Director of Finance?
So our portfolio holders are briefed on the amendments to these reports, the fact that these fees are revised compared to what was previously seen.
Right, so it's the
SEAC.
Assistant Director for Finance plus the portfolio holders.
Yeah, so the costs are calculated, and we wish those to be accurate to cost recovery, not under recovering, not over recovering, and that's where it simply falls that there's been a recalculation, and so we're reflecting that in the finalised figures coming forward. Portfolio holders briefed accordingly.
Okay, thank you. And just in relation to a point that Stuart's made and that Caroline's raised, this did get mentioned at SEAC as well. I think the point is that on this, there is a concern about, are we charging for advice that I think the point was trying to be made anyway, because I know I was making it at SEAC as well. Are we charging for any advice that we currently are obliged to give in a free way? I think the analogy that was given by yourselves was a taxi driver comes in for his license, and you said that on some occasions they come in for some advice and they don't turn up, and therefore if they was charged, they might be more encouraged to turn up. So what we're seeing here is a proposal for things that we don't charge for at the moment. Perfectly understand that. An offer to people over a year, we'll see whether they take it up or not. As I said to you before, in my business I used to run, I've got means of finding that out anyway, but we'll see what happens. But this is in relation to that small chap or woman on a licensee in here to get some advice from a taxi license. Here it says half an hour charged, because it's not been covered up to this point.
In terms of that free advice, we would always, when we've got an applicant, provide all the information that they would have in a position to then submit a valid application themselves. It's only if they want to have that hold in that additional support to go through that application process, they can ring fence that time. We would give all advice that we can. If they were to make an application that was close to being a valid application, we would provide that advice free to get them over the line. It's only if they were to come at the outset and say, look, we want you to do and help us with this from the start. That's how we see a value added for our business. We want to get that license. I want to get that license to be a driver. I want to get that quick. I want to be earning some money. If I come in, this is worth my time, trouble and effort to pay that £19.50 to get that through as fast as I can, rather than go through the free advice, give it my best shot, maybe get some way there, but not quite over the line, and then have that to and fro. And sometimes we get that with people turning up when they don't have appointments, or not turning up at all with appointments. And so from a service point of view, licensing officers' time, it just makes it so not efficient for us to help everybody if we're losing time that we would otherwise ring fence to individuals to try and help them. So I think it's I know exactly what you're saying, Councillor Riley, but it's how we can then provide some level of free support and advice at point of contact, but with a service enhancement that allows us to be efficient for both ourselves as a council and our would-be licensees as well.
Chair, if I can assist slightly further, we have had a practice at Broadland of offering half an hour appointments to prospective new taxi drivers. That system has been has only been partially successful, and there's been a very high no-show rate of people not turning up for free appointments. That wasn't a part of the statutory service offer, but there has been a practice. So some drivers on request have said, could I book an appointment? Could I come in and see you? Maybe they've got a complicated history and they need to know whether or not they might be successful in getting a license, but it's beyond, they could just put a license application in. So there are some instances where half-hour appointments have been booked, it's not something that would be sustainable for us to offer going forward on a free basis. So what we've proposed to do there is to introduce a half-an-hour charge of £19.50 for those who wish to come in for an appointment on a more complex case of potentially applying for a new taxi driving licence. It largely is taxi drivers' prospective, either prospective renewals where some complicated history is crept in, or it's a first time. So that's the one example where there is something there has been a practice of doing, but not for all. We haven't had enough appointments to offer to all. So it's regularising that and making it available to everybody at a low cost.
Just one clarification as well. So what you're saying is, at the moment, or previously in Broadland, I think the licensing, there was variance in policy in South Norfolk. We know that from the regulatory committee, committee. So at the moment, you've had taxi drivers who have come in. You've given them some advice. That's been free. But have you actually turned away some from free advice simply because you didn't have the officer time?
We haven't done so far, but if we wanted to extend this offer to all drivers, we wouldn't have the resource to offer it consistently. What we now have, as Lee Chance mentioned, is a new business regulatory support hub where anybody can ring for our standardised published advice and information on what are your requirements and how to make sure you meet the needs for a licence. So we have a new free standardised information advice service instead.
Last point. So if you've not had to turn down any appointments so far in terms of officers' time, why don't you just leave that section alone?
Could I just come in on that one? What we've had to do is to engage contractors to assist with some of the monitoring work for our licensed premises, alcohol licensing, visits and the like, because we haven't got the resource to undertake that field work, that sort of checking of existing license compliance across the district. We've only been able to do that because we've had some COVID money funding from government to allow us to then buy in that extra resource. That's not something we've got after the 30th of September this year. So we would be looking for our own licensing enforcement officers to go and do the enforcement angle and not be tied up, shall we say, in some of the administrative support, because without that, we don't exercise and discharge the full statutory obligations we have as a licensing authority. So we're just trying to see how we can maintain a statutory service, but still in some way, shape, form, still provide free advice at point of contact with the Business Regulatory Support Hub, but then still provide that at a discretionary point of contact if you wish to buy in that service at cost recovery rather than any additional costs.
Thank you. I think some of my questions have now been asked, but I think this is what I'm just trying to clarify is we are going to, up till now, we've been doing this with our existing staff. Presumably, if we're going to start extending that, we will ultimately need more staff. Is that correct?
As previously advised to members, and in particular to licensing committee, we have embarked on a service review of licensing. We know our capacity is low. We have a full-time equivalent of 2.5 full-time equivalent licensing officers across both Broadland and South Norfolk, and that is small. So there is a service review in the delivery plan that's kicked off so far. What we're looking to do is to ensure that we can provide a service consistent with the council's policies and strategies, which includes the commercialisation strategy, but that we can provide that service to all inquiries and applicants rather than to a relatively small number. And so far, the free appointments have been serving a small number, but not in an entirely satisfactory fashion.
So my concern would be, and I would not want to see us charging for advice in order to subsidise extra visits that are legal and statutory requirements. That's my concern.
Yeah, and there's no intention that we would do so. I can understand how that point might have risen from what's just been said, but just to reassure you, there's no intention that any costs that would be recovered in this way would subsidise anything else. They're simply designed to cover the cost of delivering these enhanced services. As I say, that's in line with your commercialisation strategy that's been signed off by members. We can offer these services with existing staff on the basis that the cost returns at cost can be reinvested by the senior manager in bringing in some additional supporting resource. So we can bring in some additional contract licensing resource if that's appropriate, or we can offer additional hours to existing officers where that allows us to not lose capacity from the statutory service, but to do this as well. So this is an opportunity to give you both of those service offers to all of our prospective licensing applicants.
Thank you. I'm going to take Caroline, and then I think we've been round this quite a lot, and I think we'll wrap that one up there. So, Caroline.
So you're saying that you're short of staff. So why are we paying consultants to do the work? Why don't we employ staff?
The consultants that were employed due to COVID requirements and to backlogs. Clearly, we couldn't carry out all the business visits you would expect us to during COVID, and there were government expectations and requirements that set back the visits that were being made. So the consultants that were brought in under COVID resources to allow us to get through a backlog. That was the basis on which that was done.
So are you hoping to increase your staff? I mean, 2.5 full-time for both councils does not seem a lot.
We have a service review in the delivery plan, which has commenced now on the basis that we do have concerns that we don't have sufficient staff to deliver everything that the councils are expected to do. So yes, we do have those concerns.
Yeah, thank you.
I think in this instance as well, we're looking to just pilot this for our first 12 months. So we're not looking to mainstream it. We're looking to see how the mechanics of it work. We're not looking to overstretch ourselves with what we can offer. And so it will be an organic way of providing these service enhancements, and there will be cut-offs. At some stage, there will be a situation that it's not advantageous to buy in contract services for a small number of backfill to equate for what we've diverted our own officers to give that very, very important upfront advice to startups. But if that is successful when we mainstream it, all being well, and we review the pilot, then at that stage, when we have a basis of information of how these services are being received and how they're being used, then you can make with some certainty some projections. At this moment in time, we cannot really do that with certainty, and I wouldn't want to do that as a service manager and either overextend the authority or under deliver on the authority from a FTE equivalent on some of this work. So it's a pilot the first 12 months, and we'll evaluate it after that period.
Thank you. So I'll take us to the recommendations. So we have. Okay.
Thank you. As a member of licensing, I welcome any measures that will make sure the most suitable applicants will sit before us, because that will make my job a bit easier. But with my generic counsellor hat on, I have to say I'm slightly concerned that we're going to have a bit of a two-tier system, which will favour some applicants over others and just have a slightly unlevel playing field in terms of business opportunity. So that's just a slight concern of mine, that we could be creating that. Thanks.
With our statutory function, that is delivered as part of our requirement as a licensing authority. We take a further step to provide free advice, which is not statutory, but it certainly helps, as you say, not bring excess reports and people before licensing committee. Needlessly, if we can work through that with good advice and early engagement with those people, and that's going to continue to be freely available to all. So it's only where somebody might want to fast track something with a check and send, or see more value to themselves and having a site visit, for example, a licensing premises they're looking to relocate into our district, and they want to get finances in alignment. They want to start making employment ready for opening, and the license is quite critical because they don't want to put all the other things in progress without knowing that they could have a license and be in a position to trade. So it has its purpose, but it's not to create an unlevel playing field, but more where there's maybe more of a business plan or a business case or an individual preference to see value in those enhancements, so we can offer them. But it's not to the detriment of providing free advice at point of contact in all instances.
Chair, if I can just assist slightly further, this is a do or don't. If you want enhanced services for businesses, and we would be very happy to support those, because we see the public being protected better and the businesses having a better understanding of how best to comply. But this is a service that businesses can choose to take and have absolutely no requirements to take. It is a fact of life, isn't it? That particularly if you are in a business and you operate as a business, you can avail yourself of extra support, or you can choose not to. That is in the nature of any enhanced services that we would offer, that people can opt in or they can choose not to take them. What we couldn't do is offer it free of charge to everybody or impose it as some form of tax. Clearly, this is an enhanced service, and it's for any business to choose whether they wish to take it up or not. Some will have long-established licenses and no need for additional support. Others might be new and starting or coming new into the area, and they want to make some inquiries as to how most expediently can I get my license. Those are the people we're aiming at.
Thank you. So if I can take us to page 181, we have recommendation number 1 and number 2. And they're proposed by Councillor Riley.
I've got a proposal for 1 and 2 plus an amendment. To support 1 and 2 plus an amendment.
All right.
So the amendment is that we support 1 and 2. Absolutely understand this one. But on the amendment, ask the Cabinet to ensure that where the free advice, as it's been clarified today, it's taken quite a bit of scrutiny. I think it's been good scrutiny today, by the way. And it's taken a bit of scrutiny to clarify this. Thank you. To clarify this, but could we also just have an amendment in there after 2 that we would ask the Cabinet to ensure that with the officers, the current free advice, as it's been described here, is maintained in the way that it has been so far, with, in particular, in terms of licensed taxi holders.
Yeah. Okay. So Councillor Riley's moved that. Councillor Holland has seconded that. So we need to vote on the. For those in favour of the amendment.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Those against?
And 1, 2, 3 against.
Abstain?
And 1 abstention.
Thank you.
That's
That's carried the amendment. So now we'll take the recommendations on page 181 with the amendment.
Proposed, Chair.
Seconded by Sue Holland. All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Against? 1 abstention. 1.
Chair, would it be okay to take
Thank
a
you.
comfort break?
Yes, I was going to say we've just. Can we take a 5-minute comfort break, please? And if we come back. On page 186, again, it's very much in line with the previous agenda item. So
Chair, thank you. So you will see that the report is very, very similarly constructed, but it refers to food safety services rather than to licensing services. Our proposals in relation to food safety, typically the examples are where people would wish for additional support in relation to food safety, because of course, again, there is free access to all of our published and standardised information and advice through the Business Regulatory Support Hub, which is on a one-year pilot at the moment, and the food officers visit on an inspection basis. The enhancements that we're looking at typically here are for new business startups who would wish to avail themselves of any advice that helps them to comply easily rather than the hard way, and anything that would potentially save them money rather than costing them money. So more often than not, if businesses would be interested in a business startup support, it's because there is a complexity in some area or they're completely unfamiliar with running a food business. There is quite a lot of regulation in relation to food safety, and so the intention here is, over and above all of that standardized information and advice that we would offer to startup businesses, and Lee Chant can refer to you how we would support new startup businesses, because we contact them in every case to say hello and what can we do to give you standardized information. Over and above that, if a new business is starting up and they are wishing for advice as to how do I lay my premises out, how do I put safe systems in, how do I deal with food allergens, because I hear that they can cause all sorts of trouble. If they want bespoke advice and support, that will involve a site visit, it will involve looking through what are their proposals, and that's where this cost recovery comes in. So that's one example. The other example might be an established food business that has a food hygiene rating and are quite keen to know ahead of the next inspection, how am I doing? Have I let anything slip? Is there anything that's going to let me down in terms of my food hygiene rating when I get there? And again, we could offer an additional visit to those businesses in between inspections on a request basis if they were interested in receiving some updated support. I've changed things a bit. Is it going to affect my rating? Or I had a rating of 3 or a 4 and I'd quite like to get to a 5 if I could. Clearly, that's a significant cost when we ask an environmental health officer to travel, make a visit, provide some bespoke focused advice. So those are two typical examples: business startup, between inspections, advice and support. And again, businesses would be free to take those services up should they wish to, purely on a cost recovery basis, carefully calculated to be cost recovery only. Now, our environmental health officers, and we have relatively few, again, we are looking to review the structure and the capacity of the food safety service, and that's in the delivery plan this year. So it's not something that we could do to all businesses. So these are enhanced services that we're looking to offer with member support and approval. Thank you. I don't know if there's anything else that Lee Chant needs to add, but we can provide you with further detail if you wish.
I think this is very much in line with the previous report in that it is for enhanced services and it is on a cost recovery basis. So it's not an additional cost. So I'll go with questions now. I saw 4 hands. I wasn't quite sure who was first. I'll work this way down the table. I'll start with Sue Catchpole, Sue Holland, Caroline, and then Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, this probably applies more for this section, this report. Our economic development team and the assistance for startup businesses, is it not the case that they would subsidise or grant fund this element of training? That's what I'll call it. In some way, in situations where it's a brand new person, perhaps on benefits or in other low-income circumstances, trying to get a small business off the ground. I'm just wondering how the two things will cross over, and maybe those two departments can help each other on this. Thanks.
The Business Regulatory Support Hub already crosses over both economic growth and also regulatory. So the person that we've got providing that service is fully briefed and regularly engages with colleagues in economic growth to pass on any availability of support, and also the new Anglia LEP and signpost into wherever funding may be available. So we're already doing that. That's part of the existing free offer service at first point of contact.
So, sorry, just to clarify, you're saying there may already be grants or some kind of subsidy available for some applicants?
It's a changing environment. We always provide information of what funding and support may be available, and we also signpost to training that would be provided through Carabrec as well.
Chair, if I can assist, there is no current grant available within the council arrangements for new businesses that are starting up. However, what we do provide is an outreaching service to any new registering business to have a conversation and make sure that they can be equipped with all the advice and information at the earliest stage. That is in a pilot at the moment. It is a one-year pilot of a business regulatory support hub, but it seems to be going well so far.
Thank you. Sue Holland.
Yeah, my question just about the hourly rate. It's £56 an hour we've got on here, and given that we were just saying £19.50 an hour for the other, half an hour for the other one, I'm just interested as to why the hourly rate is much higher on this one. I guess it may be travelling, or I don't know.
The hourly rates in this case refer to environmental health officers rather than licensing officers. There are differences in salary and grading, and that's how the cost calculation is different.
Caroline.
Thank you. Again, I'm concerned that we are introducing charges, albeit for an enhanced service, and I am worried that you have the staff available to do this.
If I look at it from a point of view of the food hygiene rating scheme, that's what many businesses put a lot of value in at the moment, because that's where their customers can see what their rating is and vote with their feet, or be pleased that they've got to go into a very good establishment if they've got a 5 rating. At this moment in time, we produce our statutory food inspections. We score a business based on what we see at that time, and they get their rating. If that rating isn't what that business was maybe hoping for, they do have a current right of appeal, and they can ask for a rescore. At the moment, that is end on, so that they would then have a potentially poor rating that could blight their business, affect their customer base, and be visible not only by people that would be using their establishment, but also from time to time the EDP run stories as well, looking at low ratings across all Norfolk authorities, and produce articles in their papers. So what we were seeking to do, and that re-rating rescore is already in the fees and charges for Broadland. We already do that. But what it's there for is to show that we're looking to front end that. So if some business wants to see value in maintaining their rating, we can offer that again, or retain, and provide bespoke advice, go into that business and be that critical friend on the business's own terms, and provide that advice to safeguard their rating. That might be a business that's, for example, been a long-standing 5 rating. They're very comfortable with their systems, but for whatever reason, they've maybe had a change of head chef, and they just want to have assurances that they're still on track with where they want to be. So they see great value in their unique selling point of being that 5 rating business. In the case of takeaways, many of them will publish their rating on their menus that they give out, and so they would produce maybe a print run of 5,000 menus. They don't want to maybe have that out there and have to then recall that for trading standards purposes, because it'd be false advertising. So again, they would maybe see value in making sure that they keep that high standard, and so that's where the gain or retain pre-inspection offer can support that. So I don't see it as a punitive thing, but it's a way that businesses, if they so wish, can access that discretionary service to safeguard where they are, rather than have that right of reply at the end and get us in after the fact, because that's the wrong end of the telescope for some businesses.
I understand that. I'm just worried that you're, with licensing and with this one as well, you are offering enhanced services. Do you have the staff to back this up with?
The money we receive.
You're doing extra work, really, aren't you, with these enhanced services?
Absolutely. And the funding is cost recovery, because that, and the recommendations in the report include this. The cost recovery funds will go back into the service. And it's on a cost recovery basis. So no hours are lost if that fund is reinvested in additional hours. We have a number of part-time officers who are capable of doing additional hours here and there. We don't know if the uptake, which is why it's proposed as a pilot, will be very low, or more significant, or very high. it's unlikely to be very high in year one. So those hours where we do provide a service, the full cost of that comes back into budget, and it can be used to procure some additional staff hours so there's no net loss. So you're getting an added service at no cost to the authority.
This also comes in place for export health certificate and food import export advice. Brexit has been a challenge for many of our businesses that trade beyond our sovereign country boundaries. And so we always had export health certificate, and that's in as an existing fee and charge. But what we're finding is, because we're now a third country, a lot of the documentation that we need at border and control posts is more ramped up than what we had before. And it's a discretionary. We don't have to provide that as a local authority. And if we don't, there's other veterinary services that will provide it. But what we're trying to find a way to do is to still offer that advice, to give that advice to our businesses, because we've got the local knowledge. We've worked with those businesses. We can give those attestations to say that their product was either stored or produced in a satisfactory, compliant food business with good hygiene standards, and fast track that for them, rather than them having to then buy in that service from elsewhere, possibly having veterinary surgeons and other people come from further afield and charge them more money. So I think we're finding a way to provide an enhanced service, but not at excess cost to council taxpayers and or the detriment to the statutory service.
Thank you. So, Stuart?
Yeah, I think what Sue Catchpole mentioned has pretty much been answered, but I'd just like to just take it a little step further. You mentioned the kind of advice potentially can be available from the Business Regulations Support Service. Now, so long as we're not in a position we're putting off startups and people who may be wanting to start food-based businesses, where things are very tight in the initial times for these businesses, that the fact that, you know, we have introduced the charging regime, I can see the merits in it, I can see the benefits in it, but traditionally that kind of support would have been provided by economic development working with the Environmental Health Department, and actually, inverted commas, doing a bit of hand-holding to ensure that the business was on the right tracks. Now, all I do is seek assurances that that service is still available for somebody who is starting afresh. This is not a major problem for big businesses or established businesses or businesses with high or medium to high levels of expertise. But it is a slight concern for somebody who's enterprising, entrepreneurial, and are just literally trying to get out the blocks. I'm just seeking assurances that the Business Regulations Support Service will provide them with all they need to get started, because traditionally this organisation, Broadland District Council, provided that free. Now, I can see there is a need that you can't provide everything free. That is quite obvious. It can't be provided everything free, because at the end of the day, somebody has to pay. But I am very concerned this could work against small enterprise and small entrepreneurs who may just want to get out the blocks, especially in view of the comment you said there currently weren't any grants available. So there is reservations about this, and I do think we do need to, somebody might like to propose some form of amendment which just asks Cabinet to take this on board, and I also take on board that this is a pilot. So I do think we do need to make sure that the Business Regulation Support team, there is environmental health officers working with economic development officers to ensure this basic level of support to get a business up and running is there at the initial at the initial point of contact. I think that is important, because we do not want to stifle small local enterprise in the name of commercialisation, because councils aren't good at commercial businesses. Commercial people run commercial businesses, not local authorities. We aren't good at it. That isn't what we're here for. We're here to provide a service. But I do take on board, you know, if we need to break even with that service, it is important. But I do not want to see, I'm not saying this is punitive, I do not want to see systems which stifle enterprise. And hopefully somebody will propose something which will deal with that.
Okay.
I can quite happily propose that, yes.
Can we let
Chair,
do you want to answer the question?
Yeah, just to answer the question, and not wishing to get in the way of the debate at all. What we have done is to put together a business regulatory support hub between regulatory service and the economic development service, And the oversight for that comes between myself as Assistant Director for Regulatory and George Denton as the Assistant Director for Economic Development. So we have already brought that hub together to pull all of our advice and information in, to make sure that that fits together, and to be proactive and go out and offer that to businesses. And our senior manager can give you an illustration of how does that work when somebody first contacts the service, which might be illustrative and helpful. However, I am confident that what we've put together exceeds anything that we would previously have been able to offer, in the way that we have put a coordinator into role on a temporary one-year basis to pull all that information together, to maximise the communication of that to all of the businesses existing and new. So I think that exceeds what previously we would have been able to do in terms of standard free information and advice. But if it does assist you, then the senior manager would be able to describe how it works for a new business making an inquiry.
Chairman, can I just come back on that? Yeah, no, I get that, but traditionally that advice was available free at the point of contact between ECDEV and environmental health. And, you know, you said this is far and away above what was previously offered. Well, the reality of it is it must have been offered in the past because of all the businesses which currently started up. So, you know, as a bit of a, you know, I can see where you're coming from without any doubt. I definitely can see where you're coming from. But I would not like to see this preclude people from starting up. So long as the quality is there at the initial point of contact to allow people to get that advice on a free basis, to give them the opportunity to start a business, a legal business and a compliant business, that's fine by me. But I wouldn't like to be saying, well, yeah, by the way, we can give you half an hour, but then you're now on the clock. That is not right.
Okay, so Lee.
I can assure you that what we're doing at the moment is better than what we had before. In the past, you may have been a business, you may have wanted some advice, you may have contacted an EHO and got some food safety advice, but that EHO wouldn't be as conversant with what's available on economic growth, economic development side as grant availability or other support mechanisms. What we've done is we've consolidated that, and we've got that person in the middle between both regulatory and economic growth to be patched into both. And they've taken advice, signposting, scripting, the best way to go about starting a new business, both from EHO and from economic growth. So they're providing a much more value-added service that's coordinated in a way that helps that business get things in a one-stop shop. And that's still free of charge. All that information, all that signposting, all that existing stuff is there free of charge. And furthermore, it's an enhanced service itself, because previously you may have had one EHO answering a question, a different EHO answering a question, maybe somebody in economic growth answering a question, but that might be the same question. What we're doing is with having that coordination in a hub approach, we're understanding where maybe what might be to one officer seem as a one-off, multiple questions coming through, that's worth frequently asked questions, FAQs, and we're then putting that out information-wise straight away. So it's coming and sharing that learning from a hub approach.
Can I be very clear? That information has always been available on a coordinated basis, 100%.
Ken, and then I've got Sue.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 195, on Appendix 3, local authority fee comparisons. Now, it's a question of really understanding new business startup support, because you've made the point that there is support available initially. It's a question, because I noticed that of the 7 councils you're comparing, 2 are charging for the new business startup support, 5 are not. But it's because I think you've answered my question in that there is free support. But when I read it here, it looked to me that whatever startup support you wanted for the new small business, you've got to pay £152. But you've clarified that there is support available. Am I read that right? And presumably you've talked with other councils on this, and it's that you can see there is a difference between the other 5 councils. The only one who charges more than we do is Norwich City Council.
Exactly that. Information is free of charge, and many authorities will choose to do that, and we will continue to do that. It's only if a business wants to ring fence some time and perhaps want an officer to give bespoke advice rather than general advice that they would need to interpret, and be almost on hand to be that consultancy approach to provide very, very detailed advice to help that business. And again, that's discretionary, but we would always provide free advice that would allow a business to be compliant, allow a business at the outset, if they follow that advice, to achieve a 5 rating, they're a food business seeking to adopt the Safer Food, Better Business pact that we signpost to as part of that free advice, and linking with Food Standards Agency support for startup.
There's a wide analysis of the words new business startup support, because it is already there free initially. Is that right?
If it exists, the
Thank
gaps
you.
in the table don't mean that it's free of charge in other authorities. It means they don't provide it, or the cost was not available for us to identify for benchmarking comparison. So we should have said either not available, or they don't offer the service. So we're making comparison where those fees are available. Here we're talking about travel, site visit, bespoke tailored advice to individual businesses, and everything else is in the bracket of what we previously provided.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more question on this, and I think then we're going to wrap this one up because we've got still quite a lot to get through. So Sue, and then we'll go to the recommendations on page 191.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is building on a point that Councillor Hartley made earlier, that I'd like to emphasise that all inquiries from individuals should be treated with equal care and attention. None of us could tell which business will be or prove to be sustainable in the long run, and that any judgment by officers should be completely avoided. Some individuals are obviously easier to work with than others, but at the end of the day, nobody's going to know what their potential is, what the business's potential is, and I'd just like to encourage all to be treated on an equal basis. I think that needs to be said if there's going to be charges for some services. Thank you.
Exactly that. Information provided is without any favour or detriment to any business. What we often receive is a food hygiene establishment new food registration form submitted. It's a free to submit, and once we receive that, we're automatically contacting that business at almost by return that same week to provide information and signpost to where they would need to have that startup advice free of charge through the Business Regulatory Support Hub. The hub officer is patched into that exact information that comes through with new food registrations to then make that contact at the earliest opportunity.
Chair, if I can add, we will provide that fair, impartial advice. Some are easier to work with than others. Some have more complex and some have more simple requirements and needs, but it is the purpose of our regulatory service to be fair and impartial with all people in our regulatory capacity. We will do the same in enhanced service capacity, absolutely.
Thank you. I'll take us to the recommendations on page 191. Has it been covered before, or is this a new one? Okay.
Presumably these fees will be published on our website. Will it also be made very, very clear on the website that the initial consultation is free, as you said?
We can advertise that on our food safety licensing pages and to indicate that free advice and signpost to the hub in the first instance. So that would be there. It'd only be if you wanted it further enhanced. And during the pilot stage, we would only be looking to maybe advertise this additional support if, after having that free advice, a business were to say to the support hub coordinator, I could really do with some, I hear what you say, I've got this advice, I'd really like if somebody could come out and help me. Well, at that stage, during the pilot, we would then see that business as maybe the next step that they were looking and seeking for that extra hand-holding, that extra support package and an enhanced service than what we would otherwise provide. So I think in the longer term, definitely there would be a structure of fees and how it would equate to what service you would receive, but that would be more for, shall we say, when we mainstream it and after the pilot period.
Okay, so we'll go to the recommendations on page 191. Now, Stuart, you did put forward an amendment.
Yeah, all words to the effect, possibly under 8.1. Cabinet to authorise the piloting of enhanced food safety service at full cost recovery for a 12-month period starting 2022-23. That this words to the effect, if somebody can improve on this, happy to take it. Words to the effect that this to be operated operated and reviewed in conjunction with the Business Regulatory Support Service to ensure that quality advice is available free at the first point of contact. Words to that effect. Anybody want to improve on that?
Okay.
Okay, so we have an amendment. So,
I'll second.
okay, all those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9.
Against?
Abstentions.
Abstain?
Abstain, sorry.
Sorry.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4.
Okay, so that's carried. So we'll take the recommendations with the amendment as per page 191. Someone propose? Ken? Seconded? Stuart? All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 4.
Against? Abstain?
Oh, that's 10 for 2 abstentions. Sorry.
Thank you, that's carried. We'll move to agenda. Oh, thank you, James. Move to agenda item 14, the energy rebate scheme, and that's with Lindsay and Richard. And Mike. Morning, Lizzie. Morning, Mike. Morning, Richard. Page 196, Ken. Page 196. Lindsay, are you going first? Or yeah.
Thank you. Hello, I'm here today to present the paper on the energy rebate scheme. The paper just details briefly the main points of the scheme, which I think people are aware of anyway, but it also seeks approval for the criteria that we've drawn up for the discretionary element of the scheme as well. So just for clarity, before we start, the government guidance names it the council tax rebate scheme. However, to differentiate this from any other existing council tax rebates that we have termed it the energy rebate scheme for any internal and external communication. So that's what we'll be referring to it as the energy rebate scheme. So just to give you a little bit of background, the scheme allows for £150 to be paid for any properties in council tax bands A to D, where the council taxpayer, that is their main home. We have been paying people who pay their council tax by direct debit. We've been able to pay it directly straight into their bank account, and this has been successful now in the majority of cases. Anyone who doesn't pay by direct debit, we obviously don't hold their bank account details. So everybody in these cases has been sent a letter which will tell them how to apply for the payment, and we are currently working through that as we speak. If we don't have any contact from the customer near the end of the scheme, we are still going to credit their council tax bills with £150 to make sure that anybody who hasn't contacted us or anyone we haven't been able to contact will still receive the help that they are entitled to. So everybody will still get that £150. So in addition to the main scheme, we've also had an allocation for a discretionary element, and this will cover people who aren't in the main scheme. So bands in E to H who still have fuel hardship, for example, or people in houses of multiple occupation who are tenants, but they don't actually have the council tax liability and therefore aren't eligible under the scheme. The discretionary scheme will make sure that they're entitled as well. And it also allows us to make top-up payments to anybody who has already received a payment in either the main or the discretionary scheme, but they are still in fuel hardship, and this will allow us to help them out a little bit more if we deem that they need it. So the eligibility for the discretionary criteria was able to be determined at a local level, and you can see our scheme, or our criteria rather, in Appendix 1. The discretionary scheme requires member oversight. However, due to the timeframe of the governance process, were we to wait to go through all that, it would delay getting payments out to customers who actually need it sort of sooner rather than later. Therefore, the discretionary scheme has been designed and is in place. However, we are retrospectively going through the governance process to seek permission for this discretionary criteria. In addition to this, we've also received a number of funds over the past couple of years, especially since the start of COVID. Similar to this, schemes funded by government, administered by local governments with discretionary criteria. And we are expecting more of these types of schemes ongoing. This seems to be the way the government is addressing the cost of living crisis. So we are expecting more of these to come to us to be administered on a discretionary basis. Because of this, what this paper is also doing is seeking for delegated permissions to allow the eligibility for this and future schemes to be, which are funded by government, to be designed by the team and decided by the Assistant Director in conjunction with the Section 151 officer and obviously in consultation with the portfolio holders as well. And this will allow us to deliver any future schemes to help our vulnerable residents. It will help us do it in a timely manner without any unnecessary delays. That brings me to the end of that. So if anybody has any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, Lindsay. So I've got Natasha and then Caroline.
There we go. Thank you. This is something I've previously emailed Mike about under the discretionary. I was told before that if somebody applied for this at an address and then they moved house, they wouldn't be eligible. But is there any wriggle room for, if, for example, this is in the event of domestic abuse, we've been finding out that this is preventing people from leaving their abuser because they're scared they won't be able to manage fuel costs on their own. Is there any room there for people who you know have fled domestic abuse to be in receipt of additional help? Thank you.
Yes, in short, yes, we would do that. Yeah, so the main scheme, it's determined eligibility where you live on the 1st of April. However, the discretionary scheme is much wider than that, and it allows us to basically, as we put in the 4th category, I think anybody who needs extra help can get extra help, and they will come under that, which is why we put that in there to allow help to. Yeah, we didn't want to exclude anyone. We wanted to be open enough that anybody who needs that sort of catch-all help can get it. So yes.
Thank you, Caroline.
The payment of this scheme, how do you feel it's going?
I do feel it's going well, although I do know the public perception of that is not necessarily in agreement with that. I think the thing we have to remember is this is a massive undertaking, but the amount of payments that we have had to pay out to customers in a manner that we've never actually had to do before. And to get where we've paid, for example, 45,000 people on direct debit, but that did leave about 9,000 people who don't pay by direct debit that we had to collect their bank details from. And the problem is to process all of that is quite time consuming, and a lot of people do need help. Even though we have an online form, they need help actually going through that as well. So we've sent a letter now to everybody who is not in receipt, who is not paying by direct debit, to enable them to apply for that. We are working through that. We've paid about half of those people so far, but we have, and on the phones, for example, we have helped about 3,500 people on the phones actually apply for that online as well. So we are working through it very speedily, considering the magnitude of the task that we were asked to undertake. And I do know also, in comparison with other local authorities nearby, we are on par, if not ahead of them as well. So yes, I think we are doing it successfully.
Can I come back to you after the meeting then? Because I've got a list of 14 residents who have not had the payment. 2 of them were direct debits. Some have filled out forms weeks and weeks ago and they've not heard anything. So can I give you their details after the meeting?
Yes, absolutely. Anybody. So for example, people on direct debit, we were able to pay them automatically if their name of the bank account matched the council tax account. Nice and easy, they're easy to pay. Some were flagged up where they don't match, and one of the government criteria that we had to work by is that we were able to pay it directly into their bank accounts if their names matched. So we weren't able to necessarily just override that. So all the ones where the names don't match have been flagged up as red, and the team are working through those, which is probably why there has been a delay for some people who are on direct debits. But the team are working through it, and as I said, with 50,000 people to pay, it is a long process, but it is being worked through. So by all means, if you have a list, we can take it and work through. Absolutely, yeah.
And again, by us collecting the data now, if we have to repeat the scheme again for future one, because we already have the details, the uptake will be even higher because we've already got the bank account details.
Yes, I imagine so. Yeah, it's all kept on this online portal, Ascendant Solutions we worked with. So any detail we need to extract from that, we will be able to do so, yeah.
Okay.
Just to
Richard.
add to that, running up to when we knew we would be ready to launch this scheme, because we knew that direct debits would be the easiest way to administer this scheme, we put lots of social media out there to make sure that people were easily able to go onto direct debit, and we saw the uptake go up with that. So we were preparing as much as we can, but we also appreciate that direct debit isn't the appropriate way of paying for everybody. So we could only prepare in the way in which we could. We've dedicated a huge amount of people onto the phones to support people with their forms. We were balancing, do we give massive gaps between the letters so we can definitely deal with everybody straight away, or do we get the information out there, because we were receiving a huge amount of calls saying, where's my letter, my friend's got my letter. So it was better to get the information out there, and now we're working through to make sure that those payments can get through to the right people.
Thank you, Richard. I've got Grant, then Sue Holland.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at category 2, says this will normally be assessed on the customer's most recent pay slips, which will be multiplied to ascertain their annual income. If I'm a little concerned about individuals like myself, for example, that have got 3 sources of income, and I'll give you one pay slip which shows that I'm earning £200 a month, and you're going to gross that up, and then I'm going to qualify, even though I've got others. I just wonder about the just looking at the payslip. Is that sufficient to determine whether the person who's living in a property that is E to H, which is etc. Just I'm a little concerned that maybe you're not also need to looking at bank statements as well.
Okay, that is always the concern when you assess any type of payment like this. And for example, we do housing benefit on a day-to-day basis. Part of it is up to the customer to declare to us the truth of their income. So for example, even if somebody was claiming housing benefit, if they said they're only earning £200 a month, for example, there's a balance there on how do you actually determine whether or not that is the case. So yes, that's always a concern. The reason for the category 2 was to allow us to basically do a balance between making a speedier decision to get the help out to people who need it, and also making a more sort of thorough investigation. Unfortunately, you can't thoroughly investigate everybody who does make the application for it. So that's why we looked at the most recent payslip. But also we would look at things, let's say we're used to looking at pay slips. So for example, somebody £200 a month, their tax code would be different. So we would look at things like that if they were earning more. So we do have little ways of looking at it and things like that. So yes, it's something we are used to looking at. But the reason for those sort of standard amounts was to allow us to make a sort of, like I say, a speedier decision to allow us to process more payments rather than having to hold up all the applications by doing a thorough investigation for all of them. But yeah.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, it was just one point that a few people raised with me, was that they misunderstood the social media stuff that came out, because they thought they had to be paying by direct debit to receive the grant. So, I mean, I just clarified that with them, that, you know, it was just a way of speeding it up. But I think that actually made lots of people go for direct debit who hadn't thought about it before. So that was just one point. My main point really is that if we're delegating permission for this, which I can see is a good thing to get things moving, could we build in some form of review at some point? Because I just think it's important.
Mike.
Yep, thank you. And that's a good point. Any delegate decision needs some sort of governance around it. So what we would do, I'd work with the chair and the committee to look at bringing in, because what we want to do is not just look at the delegated scheme and make sure it's out quickly, but we need to review these schemes regularly, and actually ONS would be a good place to come back and review that to make sure that we have done what we want, and learning points for officers but members as well. So absolutely, the governance needs to be there.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, so it's stated that it needs member oversight. So the discretionary payment criteria on Appendix 1, basically, I'm just clarifying our view of scrutiny. I think I know what the answer is, but sometimes you need to ask to make sure that it's come across the appropriate way. So really, this is about this criteria having the member oversight, and therefore you then delegate off from this set criteria under Appendix 1. Is that correct? Is that why it's here?
Can you clarify, Steve? Can you clarify?
Yeah. What I'm asking is, you're asking for permission for future discretionary scheme to be determined the appropriate assistant director, section 1, and also the appropriate portfolio holder. So the reason why it's come here and going to Cabinet is because at the moment you need to come back to us on the discretionary and under that criteria.
So yeah, so at the moment we don't have delegated authority. So what we've done, I mean, we've bypassed with conversations with relevant members, bypassed the system today just to get the money out because we know it's important. But at the moment we don't have delegated authority. So as part of this report is for the future, I think there's a better model. What we absolutely need to do, and we've seen it with a number of calls we've had, people are desperate for the money. And what we don't want to do, we've seen Rishi has announced more money. So if that comes our way, we need to be quick at getting that money out the door. But what we want to do is find that approach between getting the money out the door, but not bypassing the governance process. So having a kind of a halfway house there of delegating authority to get the money out the door, but then coming back and regularly reviewing that via scrutiny would be a good governance route to do that.
And I appreciate that, Mike, because I've realised that somewhere along the line you've been applying trying to issue it, and along that process is where was the governance. So I think it's really clears this up, and it's appreciated. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Sue. And then I think we'll go to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. You were saying that a lot of people were trying to ring in. Do we have an idea of how long they had to wait on the phone to get through? This does seem to be becoming an issue for many services, not just Broadland Council, but it's, just on so many occasions people are having to wait an hour or more. And the second question is, you've said you've sent out a form now to households. Can we have assurance that you will continue to do this? I've experience of people being disconnected from their mobile phones because they can't afford to pay the bills. And that means that they wouldn't be able to have internet access easily. And so I think posting something out is going to be the only way to get in touch with people, not just the very elderly who don't necessarily use internet, but also younger people whose phones are now being disconnected. Thank you.
Yes, so we've now sent a letter to everybody who is not on paying by direct debit to, what the letter says is how to apply online, although I appreciate, as you say, some elderly people wouldn't be able to do this or wouldn't have internet access. So that is, to be fair, that is what the majority of the calls are coming through from, is people who are not able to actually make that application online for them. So what we are doing is on the phone calls is going through the form with them online, taking their details and then processing the payment that way. That's what the majority of the phone calls are about. And that is why we've also said on the letter that if you don't contact us or don't apply for this, we will credit your council tax account anyway. So that is how they will actually be able to get the money if they're not able to make that application or contact us in any way. The money will still get to them, even if by any chance they can't come here, they can't phone us, the money will still get to them. So we've put that in place to make sure.
Thank you, Lindsay. And Emma, you
Probably going to cover what Richard's going to cover, but just on calls, just to provide some assurance around what we've done to support the team. We've put additional resource in for the calls. Some of the things I've seen, the team have taken in one day the same amount of calls the rest of the council have taken in a week, to give you an idea of the volume of the calls that they have dealt with. And I think the staff have done phenomenally well to speak to who they have. And we are regularly monitoring phone calls. Stuart, through the collaboration working group, we've been looking at phone calls and stats as well. And we are doing a lot of mystery shopping to improve that, and the stats are improving. But I just wanted to make the point and embarrass the service slightly, but to recognise how well they have actually achieved those. Notwithstanding, there will be wait times. Absolutely, there will, because I believe it's about 10 minutes per call to deal with each form. So there is going to be that wait time, but I think they've done phenomenally well.
Thank you.
I'd like to also fetch in Trudy, then Richard, and then Stuart.
In front of me, apparently we'll put together a team of 8 officers to deal with calls, trying to work to bring in more staff in to assist. And as Rodney's told me, we had a short-term peak with over 500 calls a day. And as Emma has said, they can last 10 minutes because there are formal declarations that need to be read out. So it is a massive, massive task. But
But I think, as Lindsay has said, our team have done phenomenally well when you compare to the rest of Norfolk. There'll always be obviously some that are a little bit more tricky, but yeah, they've done an absolute phenomenal job.
Thank you, Judy. Richard?
I was just going to add to that. We essentially pulled the whole team off because we saw the urgency, and in a matter of a day, we quickly trained everybody up to make sure that they can, because unfortunately the amount of calls that we did receive probably was a bit more than we anticipated. But we have such a good staff team that they're very quick, very flexible, and very knowledgeable to be able to quickly adapt to take these calls as well. So we just kept shifting people over to the phones the more the queue went up. So we were reacting and monitoring it on a minute basis, because we now have the phone screens in front of us that tells us the queue at any one time. The other thing I wanted to add, just on the help to claim, I just want to throw out the community connectors again. We will also go and visit people. If someone is that desperate for £150, which there are a lot of people at the moment like that, and they can't go online, they can't call in, I think there's probably bigger support needs that maybe need to be put into place, which is what the community connectors are there for, to be able to dedicate some time to be able to go and see people. We are also visiting as benefit officers as well. So if it is just a financial package of support that they require, it may be a benefit officer, but it may be a community connector. We have many mechanisms of going out and supporting people where the traditional means is not available. The final thing is they can come into the office if they can't go other ways. We always have benefit officers on hand to be able to provide that, to do the form basically sat in front of them using our technology.
Thank you, Richard. Stuart?
Quickly.
Just very quickly.
Thanks. Yes. So obviously, running through that exercise once already, you've learned a lot of lessons. So are there some practices that are going to be put in place if you're saying that this is going to happen possibly more than once over the coming year, if the government are going to provide funds in this way?
To be honest, I don't foresee this scale of project happening again. I think it's been seen that actually it is too much for the councils to administer. So the £150 for everybody, I don't think will happen again. What I was referring to specifically was these pots of discretionary support that we get given. They say, we're aware loads of people are struggling. Here's loads of money, you decide how best to dish it out. It's those sort of smaller pots of money that I was referring to. I honestly don't think the bigger pots, the bigger scheme will happen again, because there seem to be.
But one thing, and just to build on that, Lindsay, is just, we've learned from how that works, and actually, as Councillor Mancini Boyle has mentioned, Rodney's team and my team have worked together collaboratively, get that out in a minute, and but also something about the two councils, one team as well. That resilience to be able to do that has been phenomenal, and that's been, as I think, it's one of the biggest assets that we've got between other districts in Norfolk. The fact that we've got a bigger cohort of people to pull together. That's very well.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, I think some of the comments have been made. I think there has been really good improvements, and I don't think there's been the major problems with the direct debits. And I think the point's been made that it's encouraged more people to come on to direct debits. Will make it better in so much as you've captured data. Hopefully that's compliant with GDPR. Basically, I would also concur with what Emma said. Previously, up until a month or so ago, the point Sue makes that the telephone system was dire. It was dreadful, absolutely dreadful. But I would also like to compliment efforts to be made over the last few weeks to improve this in this organisation. And has been mentioned, extra resourcing has gone into that department, which has ultimately benefited our end users, our customers. And I think it is very noticeable how the improvement has been over the period of time. And I certainly encourage members to continue to mystery shop the main switchboard to ensure that improvement continues, because at the end of the day we're delivering frontline services. As the point being made, some of the people are really in need of this resource, in need of this money, and we do not wish to be a contributory factor to that situation becoming more desperate. So there is improvements without any doubt, But I think the key to it is to make sure those improvements continue. And I genuinely think the department has worked hard to try and get this money out. It's a big task, and I think people have worked really hard to achieve this. And you know, that's my comment. But I would just like to support that.
Thank you very much. So I think with that, we'll move to the recommendation on the bottom of page 200. Cabinet to agree delegation for permission for future delivery schemes.
Can I propose an alternative to that? Only in that obviously your overview and scrutiny and you determine your work schedule. So I would suggest through the chair, we pull together a topic form on the back of this item and we can deal with it through that.
Okay. So we'll go with the recommendation on 200. It's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So now move to agenda item 15 and Helen. Page 196, Ken. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Stuart. Flying solo, Helen.
I think I shall say good afternoon. So
Just.
good afternoon, committee. I will just briefly give an overview and obviously here to ask questions. I appreciate probably at least 7 of you were at SEAC where this report was considered and unanimously, I can't say that, unanimously supported. So the purpose of the business case is to justify some additional resources for the planning team. We know we are experiencing significant major applications, strategic applications. We've just had our Rackheath application of 4,000 homes submitted. We know we're just going about to have Beeston submitted. All those applications take an incredible amount of officer time. And our proposal is to create a strategic team with additional resources to actually dedicate a bespoke team to deal with those applications. It will enable us to make sure we engage with our community, make sure we engage with parish and local members to create those new strategic growth areas which will be there for future generations and do take a lot of time to deal with that. The report has been slightly amended since SEAC, and that's to just justify where we are getting that 68 additional resource revenue amount needed from. So as detailed in the report on page 209, it actually details where that money is coming from bespoke to Broadland. So at the moment we have a base budget of 980,000 in our fees, and to cover the 68 additional cost of these resources to Broadland, we are actually got some additional income strands coming in that weren't put in the base budget. And that's through performance planning agreements, which is to discharge conditions on development consent orders. So those conditions relating to those offshore wind farms, that is money that we can recoup for dealing with those conditions. The government is also giving us a biodiversity net grant of 10,000. Plus, if we just allocate 50,000 from one of our major strategic growth applications, the planning fee for the Rackheath application was circa 150,000. That goes above what we would normally expect in the base budget. So we can justify those additional resources. As you know, we have carried a number of vacancies across the year, which has meant our performance and our quarter performance figures haven't been where we want to. This will help us address that too. Also to note is that I'm pleased to say that actually we've already got 3 apprentices within our structure, and the additional resources, 2 of them will be additional apprenticeship roles, and we are looking to offer all our planning officers that training. So we are growing our own. I think that's really important because one of the risks identified in your report is that we have got hard to recruit to area. We know there's a national shortage of planners. There is a risk that we won't recruit to all those posts, but actually we have promoted internally, which is a really good success story, together with actually training from the bottom up for future promotion opportunities. So I won't say anything more, obviously hoping that you endorse Cabinet to improve the proposed changes to the planning team as per the recommendation.
Thank you, Helen. Questions? Sue?
The 68,000 that we're talking about getting from these large scale developments, there's no sort of guarantee that we'll have large-scale developments year on year. And I'm slightly still concerned about this nutrient neutrality issue and how that will impact on developments coming forward and any funding that may or may not be available to support extra staff.
Yeah. As part of the report, we have actually said we will need to monitor. So these posts won't be going into the base budget because we need to ensure year on, year out that the predicted income will cover the additional posts that we're seeking. We're very conscious of that because clearly there may be a time when the application numbers go down and we don't need all this additional resources. But what we're saying is with natural turnover, we wouldn't then recruit those posts because we have enough resource to deal with that. So we're very cognizant of that fact. Also, the profiling we've done over the years, because of the nature of these large scale applications, we will be getting large scale fees more than we would get currently. So the trajectory on those applications coming forward, all those reserved matters, create circa 50,000 per application, which is a large fee that we wouldn't normally expect. But you're quite right, we do need to monitor that. These additional posts do need to be monitored against the income that we're predicting year on, year out to make sure that we can sustain filling any vacancies based on the fact that we obviously don't want too many staff. The other thing I would actually say is that we know there is a national shortage and there's no reason why we couldn't actually second some of our staff to help other authorities. We always ask amongst ourselves, have you got anybody we could second across to you? Have you got shortage? It's always no. So if we did have too many officers to deal with the work volumes we'll put in, we could actually look at offering that up somewhere else. So there are options to look at that moving forward. I'm not saying, I don't think there will be that case, to be honest, given the growth that we have got and the local plan we're about to adopt. The question I haven't answered is nutrient neutrality. At the moment, developers are still putting their applications in because there will be a solution to dealing with that. So we will still be getting those strategic growth applications in because we won't be able to issue them until we've resolved it, which shouldn't take hopefully too much longer with the proposals that we're looking at. Then they will actually be ready to issue as soon as we can do that. So they're not stopping putting those in at the moment.
Thank you. Ken?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Helen. Looking at the staff requirements we have, do you have any idea, especially with the age profile of all those in planning, how many we may lose by, people going into retirement, that lot? Do we have any inclination of whether or not we may have a shortage at some stage because of the way the wastage will go?
Since the report was written, we have actually had one of our officers handed in their notice because they are retiring. And we're also aware there's another officer about to retire. So we are factoring that in. I think there is enough resilience within the post to do that, to make sure that we have the resources we need. As I said, we are training a lot more younger people coming into the new career as a planner at that post-grad stage. It doesn't have to be young, it can be mature students coming in as well. So we are looking to, as I say, grow our own, which we haven't had for a long while. As I said, we've already got 3 posts within the team and 2 more are proposed, and we're also training another. So that's 7 people we're training, which I think is quite commendable.
Thank you. Emma?
Yeah, just to add to what Helen said, Ken, just to provide a little bit more assurance for you, we do for all of our service areas look at age profile. Now, we can all work till we're 310 if we want to now, can't we? Although I'm sure we wouldn't want to. But we do look at age profile across all of our areas and hotspot where we think we may have issues coming over the horizon, and then we from that do succession planning. So as Helen's highlighted, looking at how we can grow our own and get grads and apprentices in. So it's something across the board we look at, and obviously Helen's picked that up as part of her review.
Thank you. Any more questions? Take you to, oh, sorry. Saw that. No one down there?
Sorry.
No, Steve, you, and then we'll get to
Your finger went like that, Sue. Yeah.
That's a scrolling
It's
finger.
on the additional that was asked for by the leader, I see, from the SEAC. So we've got because there was a certainly a verbal at SEAC which I raised, Helen, if you recall, which was about picking up on the point that Sue mentioned here, that this relies upon big projects, additional funding coming in, and therefore there could be some risks to that. And obviously the connection with a baseline budget, because in terms of salaries, we're talking about additional 286k Okay, so if that went into the baseline budget, then clearly there's an implication there in terms of what we've got to do in terms of perhaps council tax revenue and all the rest of it. So what 2.12 now does, and I guess it's out of that kind of questioning from at SEAC, it now covers this because it's clearly stating that this would not be considered as baseline budget. Therefore, I'm guessing in a year's time, before we hit the next budget, that this would be reviewed before then. Would that be a fair assumption?
I think from my perspective, it would be if we can't, because obviously we predict the income to justify the resources we need moving forward. So if the income is on the increase, then we wouldn't need to come back to members because we have the books were balanced. But clearly, if they don't, we wouldn't be looking to secure some of the posts moving forward. There will always be vacancies in our team, I am sure. So you just wouldn't look to fill those. You would make sure you're balancing the budget, which is why we have said those posts will be reviewed as part of setting our budget each year.
Okay, so the next point to this is the structure of the teams on the charts here that we've currently got and what we will have under this is being altered somewhat, gearing up towards the major projects. So in a year's time, for instance, the projections coming through in terms of major applications is altered. At that point, you may have some vacancies to fill, as you say, but we don't know. Then it would mean you'd have to reorganise at least some of the structure, possibly. I'm just looking at the risk total.
Yeah, our posts are quite consistent. So the job descriptions for the team leaders, the principals, the seniors, and the planning officer are all the same. So the team can move around, so we can actually move their resources around without actually altering people's job roles. So we will move people into the teams where the work is. So if the East team has got all the applications, you will move more of those officers into that team. So they're generic posts is what I'm trying to say. So we're not actually making anybody vulnerable because they are those generic posts across the team, which we move across.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one last point. This is the officer deletion here of the, again, it's attached to these two previous questions. The deletion of a officer post, planning officer post. So currently we've got officers in place, they're dealing with minors as well as majors, and removing that one planning officer. Would that cause any resource issues in terms of minors that we've had reported earlier on that have been flagged up red? Would that cause any issues there in terms of that service?
No, we factored that in because the apprenticeship roles we got in were actually doing that level of work. So we're looking at actually what resources we need to cover the level of work we've got. There's also existing 2 vacancies at planning officer. So just deleting one of those to reprofile it, we're conscious that we still need some of those to come into the organisation. So actually it's just one of those posts we deleted to actually use that money to offset a more senior officer, of which we have got a shortfall. It's actually more experienced people, because obviously we've had people leave the councils, is where we need to recruit to, not at that lower level, because we're training our officers up. And as I said, we've got that additionality already in the structure. So that's only one post that we've reprofiled into a principal officer, if you like.
Okay, final point on this, Chair, is in terms of the reorganisation of planning, which was 18 months, 20 months ago under the collaboration. I understand, and we asked this question several times in several places, that the headcount wasn't reduced, that it was put together for efficient reasons, not quite sure what that was, but the headcount wasn't reduced. So the headcount here remains the same apart from the vacancies which you need to fill, and net increment temporarily, possibly, because it's not going in the baseline budget, of a total of additional 8.
I think because we're only looking for the additionality within the reprofiling, the savings within the budget, we aren't looking for all of those posts to be safeguarded, because the amount is only 68,000. So that's a couple of the posts which are additional to the base budget, if you like. So it's not all 6 posts that are kind of needing to be reviewed every year. It's just that additionality of those posts that are costing us an additional circa 70k.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So I'll take you to page 213 and the recommendation 7.1 to Cabinet to approve and propose the change to the planning team with the intention to fill the current and new vacancies. Someone propose? Ken, second. Caroline? All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just correct that? I had stepped out the room, so I abstained.
Thank you.
Could I just ask you, I just think it's important for scrutiny that we've actually done some scrutiny on this. The minutes reflects the questions that just happened. I think it's important for the council in terms of safeguarding the budget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, got those. I'll take us to agenda item 17, the exclusion of press and public. I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006 would be disclosed to them. I so move.